Hey, what is going on, Bulls and Bears YouTube family? It is Wednesday, February 23rd, 2022. Markets, as I am recording this, are in the red. Now, the stock market, the indexes, they're all in the red right now, but they should be way deeper in the red. There should be a much bigger sell-off than what we're seeing right now, considering the situation. So let's just put this into perspective. We've got record inflation, or the highest in 40 years. It's actually higher than the early 80s when you look at the fact that we've been already at elevated price levels, and now from here we're measuring the inflation based on percentage increase, but we were already at high levels because of this economic bubble that was created via the money creation and our system of money. So this is much more dangerous than when I look back at the 80s. It's much more dangerous than what we saw back then. Back in the 80s, they were actually willing to fight inflation with a Fed funds rate that was upwards of 15%, closer to 20% at one point. So what we're seeing now is far more dangerous than anything I've ever lived through, in my opinion here. But let's talk about the over 3.5 million people that have now fallen into poverty. But first, a little bit on what's happening over in Russia, Ukraine, and how that could impact us here. Now, this is not a political channel. I'm not a foreign policy strategist or even an analysis, but I can give you a pretty good idea of what's going to happen here. And it's going to be rising prices, higher cost of living. Why? Because we are not completely energy independent. The U.S. is still one of the world's largest oil producers. That has dropped off here recently in the last year and a half. But one of the big guns worldwide is Russia as far as the top oil producers. All right, now what's happening over there between Russia and the Ukraine is pretty interesting when you look at some of the headlines. You see this tank right here. This is a peace tank, all right? And I'll explain it in a minute. This is a peace tank. You see that barrel right there? The tank gun here. It shoots out roses and it shoots out candy, because why? That's a peace tank. It's nothing but love, according to this headline. Look at this right here, Daily Mail. All right, so according to some headlines right here included, Putin's peacekeepers and tanks roll into the Ukraine separatist regions. So this is a peacekeeping tank, right? So I wonder if it does fire, if it's going to be peace missiles that it's going to fire, peace projectiles, right? Like I said, candy and flowers are going to come out of that barrel. All right, so here's the big concern for me as what Americans might be feeling, from this, what's happening over there in Russia, Ukraine. We are going to see higher oil prices. So Russia is a major supplier of oil to the U.S. Yes, the U.S. is still one of the largest manufacturers of oil, but we are also the largest consumer of oil in the world. And we're by far not the largest country by population, but we consume the most oil. We're the world's largest consumer nation, not just oil, but in many different ways, goods and consumption overall. But this tells you how we are as Americans. We consume. It's a consumer-based economy. It's a service sector economy. Very little manufacturing versus a ton of consumption. Just think about these countries over in Asia, for example. Some of them are 4 times larger than the U.S. by population, but we still consume more oil here in the U.S. So as a country, we have an unlimited credit card. As consumers, we have unlimited consumption. Basically, you can file for bankruptcy, discharge your debt, and do it all over again 10 years later. And those are just a couple of the components to being a consumer-based nation. So yes, even though we still manufacture a lot of oil, we produce a lot of oil, we still depend on other countries, including Russia, for oil, because we consume just so much oil. So expect higher prices. Let's take a look at what's happening today with prices. Still holding above $92, close to $93. And I do expect $100 oil. And let me clarify, because some people said I was calling for a crash. I said there will be a pullback at some point, but at first I expect it to go $100 plus. Now I expect a pullback maybe down into the 80s, maybe into the 70s. just based on what we've seen in the past. All right, but then again, we're headed into uncharted territory. In fact, we're already in uncharted territory. We've never seen prices at these levels combined with all of the parts that are going to lead to even higher prices going forward. And we're talking about the banking system, our system of money, the supply constraints, the labor constraints. And when you pour everything together, you know, it's a witch's brew. It's a pot of definitely uncertainty, and I would stress caution, you know, right now as far as financial times go. All right, households are already squeezed. A lot of people are falling back into poverty with the expiration of some of these rescue programs. Let's go ahead and talk about that next. Widely reported, this one's out of NPR, 3.7 million more kids are in poverty without a monthly child tax credit. So now there's groups out there saying this child tax credit needs to be permanent. All right, so I'm sure many of you might agree that they should just keep handing out the money because things are so expensive. All right, but think about this. Look at the bigger picture here. The fact that we're so dependent on handouts should tell you there's a big problem. And what is the problem? The cost of living is too high. Inflation is too high in many different areas. But nothing's being done. They're not raising rates. They're not fixing the problem. They're not fixing our banking system to prevent these bubbles from happening. And there's bubbles everywhere you look. Prices are too high everywhere you look when compared to incomes. So it's these types of programs that create detachment from wages, right? So wages and prices should be very closely aligned, but when you can create endless amounts of money, when you can spend endless amounts of money, when you can prop up the banks no matter how much money they spend out, when you can buy endless amounts of mortgage-backed securities, there's no ceiling, there's no top to the bubbles, including the housing bubble. Now we'll have to see what happens. We'll see if the taper really does happen, if mortgage-backed securities are done being bought. If that's the case, you know, we could see major changes coming up very, very soon. But I've told you my thoughts on this. I really doubt they say they're going to do what they say they're going to do. All right, but a little more from this article. Since monthly payments from the expanded child tax credit expired at the end of 2021, 3.7 million more kids in poverty now since the expiration of this program, according to a study out of Columbia University. All right, folks, we have big problems. If it were not for all the rescue programs, the enhanced unemployment benefits, all the other payout programs that have been around for decades, child tax credits, on all the different ways people have been helped, the cancellation of rent, the mortgage forbearance, imagine how much worse it would be. I don't think anyone really knows exactly, but it could be half the country could be homeless right now without all these rescue programs, without the endless debt machine backing all of this. All right, is it that bad? I don't know. It could be worse. But please let me know what you think down in the comments. How bad would it be if we're not for all the rescue programs and we see that just a few months after the expiration of this particular tax credit, how many people fell into poverty? Almost 4 million. So that should give you a hint of what's happening here in this country. We've got big problems. I hope everybody's well. Keep preparing, keep stacking, stay well, stay safe, people. Big love. Bye for now. Peace.